everyone, welcome back to Light Talks. If this is your first time joining us, my name is Allie, and I know I say this every time, but I'm really excited for today's episode because it is a special one. Right now as a church, 922 Ministries, we're in the middle of a 5-week sermon series called Can a Christian fill in the blank? We've been asking some big questions and are focusing on these questions as a church family. Can a Christian date a non-Christian? Can a Christian smoke weed or drink alcohol? Can they vote for that political party? Can they go to war? Or can they go to a non-Christian school? So if you aren't a member of our church, first, we're glad you're listening, and encourage you to check out those messages on our YouTube page or by podcasting our sermon messages. If you want to go into a deep dive into any of those topics, you can simply search 922 Ministries on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform to find those messages from both of our campuses, the Core and St. Peter. But that is not why we're here today. We're not going to talk about those topics here on Light Talks. We get to go a little deeper and cover a lot of extra questions that we don't get to talk about that doesn't get a whole sermon. So we're really excited to talk about that. To walk us through these questions, I've got not one, but two amazing pastors joining me for this conversation, Pastor Michael Ewart and Pastor Steve Waldschmidt. Thanks for being here, guys.
Absolutely.
Glad to be here.
Woo. All right, Pastor Michael, you've been on here quite a bit. I was just asking you before this episode, how did you find yourself here again? And
you asked me, and I said yes.
Yes.
I'm not sure why, but I did.
He might not say yes anymore. Pastor Steve, you're the new guy on the block here at 922.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so why don't you give us like a 1-minute download of who you are?
Sure. So I am a Wisconsin native. I grew up kind of in the Milwaukee area, and after I graduated from the seminary, I was assigned to serve at a church in the St. Louis area. Mm-hmm. And so for the past 11 years, I have been in Missouri at a church there. My wife's name is Michelle. We have 6 kids. The oldest is 11 and the youngest is 1. So our house is very, very busy, very loud, all of the emotions, all of the time. I came to 922 because I was just really excited about the opportunity to just serve as a discipleship pastor, where, especially at this church, there are just so many people that, God is moving in their hearts and they want to be involved and they want to grow in their faith. How can they grow in their faith beyond, the Sunday experience? That's kind of what my role is here, to help them get connected with life groups, help them get connected in meaningful acts of service, help them grow in their devotional life or in their prayer life and things like that. So that's what I'm really excited about. I'd say in my spare time, I like to just, find some Instagram reels to send my wife and just make sure that my kids feel like they are loved and cared for and provided for.
Yeah, 6 kids. I think it's funny because, Pastor Michael, you also have 6 kids.
I do. Ours are ranging from 29 years old down to almost 16 years old. And with about 30 years of ministry experience here, I think our different seasons of life might really help with our topic for today. We'll be able to give different insights into these good questions.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Well, thank you for joining us, Steve. We're happy to have you here at 922. Awesome. All right. So today we're going to do some rapid fire style conversation with more can a Christian questions. And I want to be clear with the fact that the goal isn't to give a list of do's and don'ts as a Christian, but to really think about how God's word guides us in these gray areas. So as Christians, we're called to live a life set apart, but the world is super loud and it's hard to cut through all the noise sometimes. So that's what we're here hoping to do today with some of those questions. But before we dive into those questions, a lot of them are maybe things that the Bible doesn't directly address. And so how do you walk through that? How do you discern what's best? We're going to talk through 10, 12 questions, but you probably have a ton out there. So before we dive into specific questions, Pastor Michael, I'm going to ask, how can we walk through, can I do this? Is this right with God? Like, what things should we be thinking about? And then we're going to apply them to the questions as we walk through them. But what should we be thinking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a situation where it's better to teach a person how to fish rather than to give them a fish. Yeah. So when you have decisions that you have to make as a Christian, I think there's a framework you can use or a paradigm that you can apply to all of those situations that will help you make decisions that are godly and good in the moment. So as I thought through this, I think there are probably 5 things to keep in mind every time you have a decision that you need to make. And tried to make it as memorable as I could, as portable as possible. So think of God, me, my neighbor, heart check, wisdom. So kind of 5 things to walk through every time you have one. Okay, number 1, God. What does God say about this? What is What is his direction? What are his principles? What does his word say? Very often God is very clear, and then you don't have to go through the other four. If God is clear on what he says, we submit to him. We know that his way is the best way. We yield to our Father. So that's why that one's number one.
Yeah.
Usually God has some principles even when he doesn't directly speak to a topic. So if the principles are there, take those into mind and heart as well. Going on to number two, me. How does this impact me? Does this hurt me? Does this help me? What's this going to do to me? Would be the second thing to think through. Third thing would be, how does this affect my neighbor, the people around me? Is this going to lead them into sin or temptation? Is this going to be a blessing or a benefit to them? I need to consider that when I'm making a decision. The fourth one again is the heart check. Okay, so what are my motives? That is so key. A lot of times it's the motive that matters, not just as much as the action.
Sure.
Sometimes the same action in one situation or another, one is sinful, one isn't, because of the motivations of our heart. So why am I thinking of doing what I'm doing, making this decision? What is the motive behind it? It's critically important. And then the fifth one, then just to kind of step back and say, what does wisdom say? What is the wise thing to do? A really good question to ask. Seeking wisdom from people outside of you, other Christians, is a really important thing to do as well. Taking a look into the future. What will 10 years from now me think of this decision? That can help you make an objective, good decision as well. So running through those 5 things, I think, is a really great decision-making paradigm. That God, me, my neighbor, heart check, motives, and then wisdom. What is the wise thing to do?
Awesome. All right. So we will apply that in a lot of our questions today, but hopefully that's helpful for all the other questions that we're not able to address today. I'm really excited. Are we ready? We're going to dive in?
Yes.
I don't even know what you're going to say to some of these answers. So I'm really curious. I might just be surprised along with everyone else. So here we go. The first one. Hopefully this is easy. First question. Can a Christian do yoga? And yoga's everywhere. You see it at gyms, on YouTube, at schools. They use that for the kids. But yoga also has roots in Eastern religion. So is yoga just stretching, or is there something spiritual going on that Christians should avoid? Help.
Yeah, great question. I've heard this question a lot as a pastor, a good one to wrestle with. So let's apply our paradigm. What does God say about yoga? He doesn't.
Okay.
Thou shalt not do yoga isn't in the Bible. The Bible does warn us about indulging in pagan religions, of course, or being an idolater, having false gods. But specifically about yoga itself, we don't see anything inherently about that. So what does it do to me? This is a really important question to wrestle with. As I do yoga, is it leading me into down a path of seeking out more about Eastern religions? Is it am I being distracted from Jesus as my Savior, or is this literally just stretching and exercise? And if it's the latter, that's a good thing. If it's starting to lead me into Buddhism, that would definitely not be a good thing. Consider, what is it doing to the people around me? Am I leading them into a false belief or down a path that's not good, or not? But consider that. What is it doing for the people around me? What are my motives? Why do I want to do this? Well, I just want to be healthier. I've heard that yoga is great and the stretching is good and that it's an efficient exercise, especially more intense yoga. I learned that just like a week or two ago, that there is intense yoga. I always thought it was just slow and stretching, but apparently there's an intense way to do it. And it's one of the healthiest things you can do,
Yes.
I heard.
I think they call it hot yoga.
Hot yoga. Okay, good. I learned a term. So, if that's your motivation and that's what's in your heart, that's not a bad thing. And then, just what is the wise thing to do? And what will 10 years from now me think about this? If it makes me healthier and I'm just as rooted in my faith in Christ, certainly not a bad thing at that point. That would be an okay thing to do and a good thing. So pure stretching and exercise, good. Is it leading me into Eastern religions? Bad. I think each Christian has to wrestle with what it's doing for them.
So I'm going to break this down practically. Years and years ago, I was at a team bonding thing. This is probably a weird team building thing to do. But one of our leaders there was I don't know, what do you call them? Yogis. She led yoga a lot. And so she went through the whole practice, all of the stretching, and we were all participating. And she incorporated some of this Eastern religion stuff into how she led this. Should I have participated? Like, can I still participate in that as long as like I am not right at what point do you have to cut that off? Because I think that happens in a lot of the classes. You have that mixed in. You're there for the stretching, but that also is mixed in. So do I have to cut off ties there immediately, or can I participate in that?
Great question. And again, I think you have to evaluate in the moment. I know it's not hurting my faith, you might say, but what is it doing for the people around me? And you might reach the conclusion, I think it's neutral for their faith too. It's not for, it's not against, in which case I think you could participate in good conscience. But if you feel that those elements are going to lead some people deeper into Buddhism or Eastern religion in some way, now, as a matter of conscience, you might not want to participate in a situation like that. So I don't want to make any hard and fast rule for a situation, but those are the things to wrestle with and think through.
Did you just not give me an answer to an answer?
I will always do that. So actually, this is intentional. I don't want to give a rule where God doesn't. So I think we need to wrestle with it, think through it, and apply the framework that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, good. Awesome. All right, next question. Can a Christian buy lottery tickets? It probably seems like it's harmless fun, just a couple dollars here and there, maybe a little bit more. Others will see it as gambling and greed. How should a Christian think about that?
Wasn't it just like a month and a half ago or so when the lottery hit like $1.7 billion, just an insane amount of money. I did have to stop and do the math on it, that once you take the payout and pay your taxes, you'd only have like $550 million left.
Only.
So that's when I decided it wasn't worth playing because that's not real money. No, when you do hit those big numbers, it's in the news and people who never play start to play. So that's a great question. Should we play the lottery or not? Some of the applicable verses to think about, well, what does God say about it? Again, lottery isn't in the Bible, but there are verses about watch out for a love of money. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Do I lack contentment? Contentment is clearly spoken about in the Bible. Am I greedy? Am I not satisfied with what God has entrusted to me? Am I looking for a shortcut? Am I putting my confidence and trust in money instead of God? If any of that's behind my actions, the answer is don't play the lottery. That's not good for your heart. It's not good for your soul. Don't do that. Are you hurting others by doing it? Not directly. If your money, however, that could have been used to be generous and help somebody else is getting poured into a lottery system and you don't have those resources available, you could be hurting somebody. Is your participation encouraging others to become more greedy? Are you putting a stamp of approval on something that's ultimately not good stewardship or that encourages greed, perhaps? One thing to think about too, there was one pastor who put it this way. He said, the lottery is a tax on people who are bad at math. And it tends to be played by people who are in a poor economic situation. People who can least afford to play the lottery are the ones who play the lottery the most. Our state budgets are being supported by the people who can least afford to support them because that's the people who are playing the lottery. Personally, that's not something that I, in good conscience, can buy into, at least not on a regular basis. I'm not going to support a system like that. Full disclosure, I've played the lottery, I think, 3 times in my life.
Did you win, Pastor Michael?
I can't reveal that. So, no, I haven't. Not at all. I could see if I played regularly that it could start to lead me down a path of discontentment and greed. So I honestly, when the pot was so high recently, I thought, maybe I'll stop by and I'll buy one just for fun. I never got around to it.
Sure. Wasn't that important to you?
Which I think is a good heart check. It shows, no, it wasn't that important to me. My heart was in a good place when it came to the lottery, I think. So I don't want to just say, if you play the lottery, you're sinning. That would be going beyond what God says. But all these things that I just talked about, I think are good to consider.
Yeah, for sure. Pastor Steve, have you played the lottery before?
I have. when I was working at Summerfest in Milwaukee, the station where I was just across from where they were selling a whole bunch of scratch-offs. And so my friends and I, every once in a while, would go over and we would spend a little bit on the scratch-offs. And one time I do remember winning $20 out of like a $3.
Big winner.
I know. And then I went and I bought a Chipotle burrito because that was the next stand over after that. So
That was the only time, though?
Yes.
Awesome. I've never bought lottery.
Really?
I haven't felt the need to, and it seems confusing to me. So, okay.
Maybe one more thing to be aware of is that it can lead to a gambling addiction as well as lottery, like a gateway drug into
into
more
further gambling. Yeah.
That is like I think I heard recently pornography is the number one addiction that's growing in America today, and number 2 is gambling. Gambling addiction is the second thing. So will playing lottery lead into that? Then that's also not a wise thing to do.
Yeah, good call out. Good thoughts. All right, next question. We're going to keep this moving. Can a Christian get tattoos or piercings? This one comes up a lot. I know there's that passage in Leviticus that I think sometimes gets taken out of context. Is it just a personal expression? Is it something the Bible warns against? What's the deal?
So it's interesting. Whenever we talk about this in any context, we always get a lot of replies, and we're going to this one as well, I think. So Leviticus 19:28 is where that comes from, and it is abundantly clear. Do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord. Okay, well, there it is, cut and dried. Until you think about the context. For the dead, this was a pagan funeral custom. Don't do what the pagans are doing, the unbelievers. That's why that warning was put in place. There is no New Testament repetition of this prohibition. So there are a lot of Old Testament laws that God put in place for a time for his people that don't apply to us today. People who say we can't get tattoos because it's right there in the Old Testament and it's clear. Those same people are not sacrificing animals today, even though that's also abundantly clear as something that should be done in the Old Testament as well. We recognize that Jesus is the fulfillment of those Old Testament laws, and that the ceremonial laws of the Old Testament are not something that would apply to us today. If we're getting a tattoo as a mark of protection, as a pagan funeral rite, as a way to have good luck, as part of a fertility cult. They did that in Old Testament times as well. All bad motivations. That would be wrong. That would be sinful to do that. To mark yourself as a pagan or an unbeliever would be a sinful thing to do, for sure. But are there positive motivations for getting a tattoo? I sure think there are. Can it be a cross on you? Can it be an opportunity to witness to people about your faith? They might ask about your tattoos, and then you can tell them about Christ. That seems like a pretty good motivation to me. So again, I think your wisdom, really, you just have to think, will 20 years from now me be happy with this permanent marking on my body? I personally, I struggle with big decisions, so I've never gotten a tattoo. Not because I think it's inherently wrong. I just think 20 years from now, me will probably regret it, whatever it is.
What about piercings? Does the Bible say anything?
That's a good question. Is there a verse? It does talk about piercings too in a similar light, doesn't it, Pastor Steve?
The only one I can think of is encouraging women to find, beauty in their inner character, and not so much in their, in earrings and jewelry and things like that. But off the top of my head, I can't think of anything more specific than that.
Right.
Okay. Right. So tattoos and piercings allowed. With
check
a good
your heart
conscience.
and your motives. Yep. Sure. But yeah.
All right.
Not prohibited.
All right, Pastor Steve, this one's for you. We are in this season right now. Can a Christian celebrate Halloween? It's only a few days away by the time this episode releases. So let's talk about Halloween. Some families love that. They dress up for it. Others stay away because of the dark and spiritual side. As an adult, I don't even know where I land on this. I grew up, I've never trick-or-treated in my life. I have kids of my own now, and I still go, I don't know what the right thing to do is. So give us your wisdom, Pastor
Sure.
Steve.
Sure. Applying Pastor Michael's paradigm here, we're going to look first to God's wisdom and just see some of the principles that He has set in place for us. And of course, there is no specific command whether you should or should not trick or treat, or celebrate Halloween or anything like that. But there are some clear warnings against practicing like the occult, celebrating the occult. Deuteronomy 18 has a lot to do with that. And then the New Testament, Ephesians 5, encourages us not to have anything to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness. And there certainly is an element of that when it comes to Halloween. But that isn't all that Halloween is. And if that were everything that Halloween were all about, either in our culture or in the way that it is celebrated in our families, in our neighborhoods, then it should be something that we would avoid. But we see that there is something else to it, that there is an element of just good-hearted, lighthearted fun. So if God isn't specifically telling us what we should or shouldn't do here, you apply the rest of the paradigm and you think about the personal impact that it might have on me and on my faith. Am I being led to think that witchcraft is something that I should be getting into? Am I being led into thinking that violence and murder are things that are acceptable? So if we're checking our heart and saying, okay, if Halloween is leading me to think that these things that God said are wrong are actually okay, or maybe even kind of fun, then it should be avoided. But if I said, this is a day for me to have a good family experience, my son is going to dress up like Spider-Man and my daughter is going to dress up like Princess Peach or something like that, and we're going to go and we're going to collect candy from the neighbors, there certainly is not any spiritual danger in that. Or if there's a party in which, grown-ups are getting together and they are, dressed as Mario and Luigi and all of the different fun things that they might, think of, there certainly isn't anything wrong with that either. What about the impact it has on others? I certainly wish that some of the big box stores would think about the impact that it has on my 3-year-old when I'm pushing them through Costco and they have the Halloween decorations on display, in July for some reason.
Yes.
Even way back in the summer, you can see, my son will cover his eyes and almost shake with terror as we approach that section.
Mine will too.
Yes. Yeah. And so we think about the impact that we're having on others, and maybe that's also true in our neighborhoods. If we're just putting, a display in our yards that is something that isn't that is scary or is just being gross for the sake of being gross. You got to think about the impact you're having on like the kids or other people in the area. So that is certainly something to think about. Another aspect of that is, are we making light of the devil himself? Like, the devil is a very real enemy and is very dangerous. On Halloween, are we making him look like he's, kind of harmless and maybe even a little fun with red horns and a pitchfork and that kind of thing? If he's just kind of made out to be like this character that isn't even really real, then, certainly want to avoid doing that as well. Check your heart. What are the motives here and the why that behind it? I think when it comes to the spiritual danger behind Halloween, I'm not sure that it really comes down to the fact that people who do practice occult, practices, that they are looking and saying, look at all these Christians who are joining along with us in this celebration. I don't really think that's the real spiritual danger. For us, in our house, the real spiritual danger actually comes after Halloween, when all the candy is there, and there might be a temptation to eat too much candy, or lie about how much candy we've had, or fight about which pieces we want, and or steal. All of these very real temptations that we do face. Those are spiritual dangers. I remember hearing a pastor once talk about how oftentimes we think about the attacks of the devil, and we make it about like when we're in the middle of the night and the house is dark and we hear a noise, and we say, oh no, the devil's after me. But we don't really think about when we're feeling tempted to lie or tempted to steal or tempted to do something we shouldn't be doing. We don't go run around screaming, the devil's after me.
He's in plain daylight then.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yep. Exactly. So, when it comes down to it, what's wise and what isn't, again, we can say, "Thus saith the Lord" about certain things, but sometimes it just comes down to, "Thus saith Pastor Steve." And so, what does Pastor Steve say about Halloween? It's fine. There are definitely ways to participate that are harmless, that are in good fun, and especially if you participate in things like a trunk or treat or one of those activities often put on by churches. They can even be a faith building activity too. So,
what would you say to the parents out there who want to pass along that to their kids? Like, how do you talk about Halloween? Because there are the scary things out there. There are the witches and the ghosts and all of the devils and everything like that. How can you approach that from a Christian perspective if you choose to do Halloween?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you just always point to Jesus, and say, there are definitely enemies of Jesus, and so we don't want to pretend that we are enemies of Jesus, whether that be witches or ghouls or goblins or demons or devils. But we can definitely honor Jesus with the fun that we're going to have today and the memories we're going to make as a family, and kind of steer their ideas about what they want to be away from those things and more toward just the fun. Let them use their God-given imaginations and things like that.
Awesome. Love that. Well said.
However you decide for your family, have an intentional conversation about it. Talk about it, whether you're doing it or not. What's the why behind it? That's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure.
When I was a kid, I dressed up as Fred Flintstone as a 5-year-old. Oh. And I went to this one house, and the woman opens the door, and she says, "Oh, look at this cute little boy. What are you dressed up as?" And I said, "I'm a vitamin." Because the Fred Flintstone vitamins were a thing back then. That's how I understood Fred Flintstone. So it was a pretty innocent thing for us back then. It was not associated with the occult or evil.
Yeah, I think about, especially you're in your neighborhoods, you're going door to door. What a great way to connect with your neighbors and show the love of Jesus in different ways. So use it as an outreach opportunity to share love to other people. So I love that. Kind of on the same topic. Can a Christian read Harry Potter or fantasy books with magic? Which this one also sparks a debate, I think in the same realm as Halloween often. Are they fun stories? Do they open the door to something spiritually harmful? Where do you land on that, Pastor Steve?
Yeah, great question. I think Harry Potter is the one that kind of gets the headlines just because he was popular for a number of years and for a whole generation of kids that were reading the books. And, a lot of Christian parents were wrestling with this question. But I think we did the right thing here by kind of opening it up a little bit and just talking about fantasy fiction in general, because if we're not going to be okay with Harry Potter, then we also should not be okay with The Wizard of Oz, and we also should not be okay with even Christian fiction that involved some of these elements like C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and that kind of thing. So if we just kind of open it up a little bit to the idea of fantasy books or magic, Scripture does warn us against practicing witchcraft and sorcery. Galatians 5, Revelation talks about that. But reading about fictional magic is very different than practicing real occultism. So what's the personal impact? Can I have, very similar to the questions we're asking about Halloween, can I do this in a way that sparks my imagination, that is a good form of storytelling, kind of being able to tell the difference between good and evil, and is that driving me toward understanding the story of salvation in any way? I think those are real good questions to ask yourself. So what is the personal impact on me? Am I being driven am I being driven to think that witchcraft is something I should start incorporating into my life? Or am I just, using my God-given imagination to, be entertained by this form of fiction? So again, check your heart. If these are just about entertainment or imagination, it's going to be perfectly fine. But if you're, genuinely interested in things like the magical elements or spiritual issues, are those real possibilities? I think the bottom line is fantasy fiction isn't inherently problematic for many mature Christians, but it could be for maybe the younger generation. And maybe that is where parents can kind of step in and talk about these things with them, show them the appropriate Bible passages that talk about God, talk about the way God created the world, talk about the order of nature and things like that, and then maybe point to some of the ways that people have called on spirits throughout the Scripture, which are clearly. We're told clearly that God says we shouldn't be doing that. Just parents having these conversations with their young people, I think, is a good thing.
Yeah, great.
One of my sons was an avid reader, and he read all the Harry Potter books and a lot of other things in that genre. And I just never saw any evidence that it was leading him into occultism or an interest in witchcraft or anything like that. He categorized it for what it was. It was fictional literature. Could it happen to some? It's possible. Again, good conversations and communication about these sorts of things. If you know your kids are reading it, talk to them about it.
Yeah, awesome. Kind of in the same realm of as entertainment, can a Christian watch R-rated movies or listen to explicit music? It's everywhere. I think it's common, to find a show or music that doesn't have some form of this is super hard unless you're like watching PBS Kids or something else like that. So is it okay?
Yeah, I've got some thoughts on this. The question as it's worded when it comes to R-rated movies, again, I think if that's the line that we're going to draw, I think that we would also have problems recognizing that Passion of the Christ, an R-rated movie, is, we wouldn't be able to watch that. Mm-hmm. You think about other movies that are rated R, and the reason that they're rated R is because they have, maybe they tell about the horrors of war and how terrible, things like that are, or how terrible crime is. And oftentimes that is going to involve graphic depictions of violence. And so what does God say? Should we stay away from all of it? I think that we do have the prevailing principle of garbage in and garbage out. Are we thinking when we're watching movies like this or television shows that involve a lot of explicit content or violence, do we find ourselves thinking more aggressively or using that language even just in our inner dialogue? If that's the case, then there probably is an issue. So it's not so much about the rating, but more about the content and what that content is doing to your heart, to your faith, how it is impacting your ability to love your neighbor. I think those are real things to wrestle with.
My wife and I don't have a hard and fast rule on R or not. We usually watch a little bit of something in the evening before going to bed, and we were watching a series that's popular right now. We like to be up on current culture, and maybe we'll watch something like that. This one in particular, though, had so many adult and sexual themes and bad language that, after 2 or 3 of these, we said, "Man, why are we watching this? This isn't good for us. This isn't good to consume." We shut it off, and we decided to find something different. So,
it is becoming more difficult to find a show that involves compelling storytelling that doesn't also involve just loads and loads of material and content that isn't good for you.
Yeah, for sure.
So really, you need to constantly be checking in with your heart, with your head of have my thoughts changed? Have the patterns of, my heart changed based on the content that I'm consuming? I think you probably could apply that to a lot of different content, movies, shows, music, who you talk to on a daily basis, what they talk about. I think that probably could be applied across the board.
For sure.
What I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. This is probably also in the same realm then. Can a Christian play violent video games?
Yeah, so I'm someone who is of the age that when I was in grade school, that's when first-person shooters became really popular. So I remember just about every day after school wanting to play GoldenEye, the 007 game, in which I think that was one of the first where you're actually able to play against other players. So you would, go find each other. You'd pick up guns or ammo or grenades and what have you, and then you would chase each other around these maps and things like that. And it was always it was always a struggle between us. If we, everybody wanted to be one particular character. His name was Oddjob, and he was about 2 feet shorter than all the other players, and so he was harder to hit and harder to find and things like that. So if you were Oddjob, that was just a cheat code. Like, you were going to win the match no matter what. And then as I, grew older, when I was like in high school and college, that's when Halo became really popular. And that was, an online, again, multiplayer game where you are fighting against each other, and whoever gets the most kills, whoever has the most headshots and things like that, you're rewarded. You win the game if your character kills the other character more and things like that. So I have given this, quite a bit of thought, and I do have some, experience playing these games. I never really got into like World of Warcraft or some of the military games.
Call of Duty,
thank you, Call of Duty.
Here.
Yep. So Call of Duty, never really got into that a whole lot, but I have given this some thought. I'm not a very aggressive person. Just struggling with aggression or outbursts of anger isn't really my thing. But I can imagine that if that was, something that somebody struggled with, that would, that violent video games could certainly move them in that direction. So I guess from that standpoint, it is something to consider and to take into account. What are these games leading me to feel? How are they leading me to think about other people? And if it is good fun and your friends are having a good time and you've got pizza rolls in the oven and things like that, then go for it. But then there also becomes a time where you kind of have to leave the childish ways behind you, and so if it becomes a time when you're still waiting for your mom to make the pizza rolls, and you have other responsibilities, and you've got a job, and things like that, then it becomes an issue of how are you spending your time, how am I managing my time. And so if I'm getting sucked into these video games that are addictive, and in some ways they are addictive because of the violent nature of them, that's not a good use of my time anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's when it probably becomes a problem, regardless of what the content is. If you're spending too much time on it, it's a problem.
Yeah, I think this is helpful. The wisdom piece, that last piece that you talked about in Paradigm, of ask the people around you, am I playing this too much? Do you see aggressive behaviors come out of me more frequently? I think this is a really good one of like, if you're not sure, ask the people around you, because they typically will see that more. And so maybe applying that piece there, because you might think you're fine. It might be time to be honest with yourself. So it's a good thought.
Yes.
All right, we are taking a hard left turn to a very different topic. Pastor Michael, can a Christian marry after divorce? It's painful. It's complicated. It's super real for a lot of people. I think I've tried to even read the Bible to figure out the answer, and it doesn't seem very clear to me. So can you translate for us?
Oh, man. This is a really hard topic, a complicated one, a nuanced one, and a hard one to figure out. I'll just be totally honest about that. And it is for me hard to figure out as well. So what can we say? Does God value marriage? Did God give marriage? Does God love marriage? Does God intend for marriage to be for life? Yes to all of that. One man, one woman who have made a promise to each other until death does them part is God's design for marriage. Does he want us to honor that promise? Does he want us to value marriage and work at them hard to keep them together? He sure does. All of those things are true. Jesus says something really challenging, and it's in Matthew 19, where he says, anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another woman, commits adultery. And it seems like a fairly blanket statement. If she was unfaithful to him and cheated on him, or vice versa, remarriage seems to be okay. In other circumstances, maybe not. And that's the blanket statement, but I think applying it is a little bit more nuanced than that. We know that Paul also says in 1 Corinthians 7 that if an unbeliever leaves the marriage, the believer is not bound in such circumstances. So the technical term we sometimes use for this is malicious desertion. If somebody abandons the marriage, the innocent party then, in that case, could they remarry? Well, this is an area where it's not explicitly said yes and not explicitly says no, which is the right one there. Again, it's not super clear. This is where things get a little bit fuzzy. And is it possible for there to be a malicious desertion when they haven't physically left, but there's abuse? I tend to think maybe that is a case where they abandon their marriage promise. They have broken the marriage vow. The marriage is broken because of the evil behavior of the abuser. And then in such a case, there's a divorce. Is that a godly divorce? I mean, is it a divorce that God would permit for the believing spouse that has been abused? Yes, I think that's permissible. Could they then remarry? I'm inclined to say probably. Would that fall under what Jesus is talking about? Probably. But there's just there isn't a ton of detail in Scripture about these things, which makes it a lot harder to apply. So, what are God's principles? And am I following them? Do I love marriage? Do I preserve marriage? Do I honor God's design for marriage? If the answer is yes in my heart, I've done the heart check, my motives are good and pure. Under what cases can somebody who divorced for right reasons remarry? Or what if they divorced for the wrong reasons? Or what if they divorced while they were an unbeliever and then they became a believer? Can they get remarried? This is where I'm just being honest. I don't want to give a cut and dried, this is right, this is wrong answer. And it's something I wrestle with myself. I guess my advice would be under those circumstances, talk to a pastor, talk to Christians that are mature in their faith, seek advice, and try to wrestle with it on a case-by-case basis would be probably the best thing to do.
Oh,
ask me more questions on that, because I know that's not super. We like it when there's a black and white answer, and that definitely was not one. So,
I mean, as a pastor, you've probably seen a lot of different cases.
Yes, a whole lot of different cases. And that's why I say it's very nuanced.
Yeah.
Every case is different for different reasons, and reasons behind the divorce. So I always like to go to the super clear cases. He's been cheating on her for 20 years with 23 different women, and then she files for divorce. Can she remarry? Okay, there we have a nice clear case. Yes, they're usually not that clear. She burned the bread one day, and he got mad and divorced and decided he was going to divorce her. Can he remarry now? I think that would be a pretty clear case where Jesus would say, no, that's not what a believer should do in a circumstance like that. He didn't honor his marriage vow in that case. But there's a whole lot of gray area in between the clear extremes.
All right, clear as mud. Pastor Steve, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say because it is such a nuanced thing and it really depends on the couple and the case and all of that, it really is important that you bring somebody into the discussion, talk to your pastor about it and talk to your pastor early about it. Oftentimes pastors find out about these things, way long after it's too late even. So talk to your pastor about the things going on in your marriage, and they're going to be able to help you walk through it and navigate it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think another important question is what do the fruits of repentance look like? So what does that mean? It means where I'm sorrowful over a sin that I've committed, what does it look like for me to have a changed life in response to the forgiveness of Jesus? I'm sorry about the sin. I take it to the cross. Jesus forgives the guilt of my sin. I want to align my life with what Jesus wants to see. What will that look like in this case with me getting remarried or not? What does Jesus want to see from me in my life at this moment? I think that's the question to wrestle with for the Christian.
Yeah, for sure. And I know this is so real for so many people. So if you're in that in-between stage, maybe you got divorced years ago and you're not sure, right? Can you remarry? Is that all right? Talk to a pastor, talk to people around you. I think that you don't have to shamefully hide from any of that as well, because I think that probably happens as well.
Yep.
All right, next question. Can a Christian be friends with people who openly live in sin? Jesus was called a friend of sinners, right? But at the same time, we're warned about being influenced by the wrong people, right? The people in your circle influence your habits. So if I'm really close with somebody who also lives openly in sin, is that going to cause me to sin? Is that okay? Is that me loving them? What should we do?
Well, Jesus was known as one who was a friend of tax collectors and sinners. So can you have friends with tax collectors and other sinners? Well, Jesus did, so I guess we can too. So there's a simple answer. And yet, we're also warned in the Bible that bad company corrupts good character. Somebody wisely once said, "Show me your 5 closest friends, and I'll show you your future." Because your closest friends do influence you.
Yep.
So on the one hand, you want to be a light in a dark world. Jesus said he wants us to live in the world, but not of the world. So how can I be a light sharing God's truth and grace with all people, including unbelieving friends of mine? Good, godly question to ask. Should you still be friends with them? Yes, because you want to influence them. But sometimes we also have to do the heart check and say, are they influencing me? Are they leading me to ungodly thoughts or behaviors? Which way is the influence going on this? And if I sense that their bad company, their bad behavior is affecting my life, then it might be time to break that friendship, or to spend more quality time with Christians that will reaffirm the beliefs that I have.
So basically, see where your heart's at. Again, I feel like that's the answer to everything right now.
Yeah, so I wanted to start with that, so that we have that we have that paradigm. It really does work in so many different situations. Go back to the beginning of the podcast and listen to it again.
All right. Another hard swing here. Can a Christian take birth control? I think that a lot of different denominations and Christians, non-Christians, they have a lot of different opinions on it. So can a Christian couple use birth control?
You're asking the 2 guys with 6 children, so
It's true. Maybe
obvious
it's not the
answer.
right question.
Next question. No, I'm just kidding. Steve, Pastor Steve, why don't you tackle this one?
Sure. So if we're thinking about what does God have to say about these issues, you actually don't have to read very far into the Bible before you hear God mention children. When he says that you should be fruitful and increase in number, he said that to Adam and Eve. We're also told, like in Psalm 127, that children are a blessing from the Lord, that they are a gift from the Lord. And yet that doesn't mean that every sexual act has to be with the intention of procreation. You know, we also have that for the purpose of companionship, for growing closer, with our spouse and things like that. So that is a perfectly legitimate reason for sex. It doesn't always have to just be for children. But again, with all of these things, it really comes down to the heart. If I'm asking whether or not I should be taking birth control, or whether or not a Christian couple should be taking birth control, it really comes down to motivation. Is it so that an unmarried person can be sexually promiscuous without any consequences? We would say no. God says that we need to be that sex is reserved for marriage, and it is something that He blesses married couples with. And so, if that's the reason, then I think it's pretty clear that God would say no in that circumstance. But we're talking about Christian couples, and what are they deciding for their life and for their future? There are a lot of things to keep in mind when it comes to that. Health being one thing, the health of the mother, health of the parents, the needs of the other children that you already have. My wife and I talk about this every once in a while, like, man, if we are blessed, we are blessed with 6 kids, and if the Lord blesses us with another one, that would be challenging. Challenging in terms of where are we going to fit another bed in this house? How are we going to fit another car seat in the vehicle? How am I going to be able to pay? Due attention to each and every one of them, and be present with them, and not just kind of ignoring the ones that don't need a lot of attention just for the squeaky wheel. And those are really things to be considering. Do I have the resources to be able to provide for them as God has given me the responsibility of being the provider? It would make things more difficult if we were to have more kids and things like that. Is that the motive? Is that the primary factor? Is that the motivating factor? I'm not sure, but it is definitely a factor, and it can be something that you want to consider. So birth control is not inherently sinful. Christian couples can pray about it. They can, talk with more mature Christian individuals for wisdom and guidance on it. But ultimately recognizing that God's will is to bless a family. It doesn't always have to involve children or more children. God is gonna bless the decision you make one way or another.
Maybe we can just add that, to be clear, children are a blessing. God clearly says children are a blessing. And I think sometimes it happens, not always. There are a lot of factors at play, but sometimes people don't know the blessing they're rejecting. And I can remember we weren't necessarily planning to have a sixth child when our sixth
poor
was born.
kids. Talk about them so much.
So yeah, I know, right? And in some ways, it was a struggle to wrap our minds around that when we knew number 6 was coming. And then the day our youngest Micah was born, just this switch flipped in our minds and in our hearts and in our household. There was this new love that was there, this new level of love that just transformed our house. And God knew that we needed this blessing. We didn't know it, but He did. And Micah, our youngest, was and has been a tremendous blessing for us that we just can't imagine not having that blessing. But in the moment, you don't know the blessing that you don't want. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Like you haven't experienced that blessing yet. You haven't received that blessing yet, and yet we're deciding I don't need that blessing. Well, you don't know that. Mm-hmm. So anyway, something to consider as well, in addition to the wise things Pastor Steve was saying.
I mean, if I'm like listeners out there, I think I'm confused now. Because, right, is it okay to prevent, having children, but are we then playing God? Because I think that's the argument out there of like, well, God will give me however many children I'm supposed to have, and I'm going to accept that with open arms. Because children are a blessing at the end of the day. But, right, is that the wise thing to do, but then are you playing God as parents? So I think like that's the argument a lot in Christian and non-Christian circles is like, what is the right thing to do to prevent, not prevent? Like, you don't know best either sometimes. But God can, I don't know.
I think we just have to make wise decisions based on the information that's at hand. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there are health reasons that it just seems wise that I wouldn't put my wife at risk for this next pregnancy, or financial constraints or whatever they are, emotional health. I try to think of a comparison. The best I could come up with in a different realm would be this. God blesses us with material things. Mm-hmm. So imagine you get an inheritance. You inherit the family farm, 100 acres, and there are 5 other children involved, 5 siblings. 3 of them aren't speaking with each other, and it's a messy situation, and 3/4 of that farm is mortgaged. And could there be a situation where you would say, I'm out. You guys can figure this all out. I'm tapping out. No, thank you, Lord. Thank you for the blessing you offered, this material blessing, but because of other considerations, I'm not going to take this blessing. Mm. That might be a comparable situation. Yes, material things are a blessing, but as you consider all factors, there are times when we might refuse offered blessings for good reasons.
I got my mind spinning, but that's helpful. It kind of leads into our next question, actually. Can a Christian choose not to have kids in general? Like, if they decide to not have kids at all and make that active choice, is that all right? Is that God honoring?
Yep, it's a good question. I think everything we just talked about comes into play for this one.
Yes, definitely. If you were unsatisfied with the answer we gave to the last question, you're going to be just as unsatisfied with this question. Great.
So glad we're asking.
Yes. Although this does add last time it was the question of birth control is that's more of a question of like, is now the right time, or do we have enough children, or things like that. Here is when the question is, can I just choose to have no children at all, or can a Christian couple choose to have no children at all? Paul does address single people, and he says it can be a good thing to not be married so that you can be focused on serving the Lord. You can be more helpful to serving your neighbor. You can dive more deeply into ministry and things like that. If you are single, you just have more time, more energy, more focus for that specific thing. Could that same principle be applied for couples that choose to have no children? I think that there can be, that having children just is not right for us. God does tell humanity, be fruitful and increase in number, but that isn't a direct command for every person to have children. And so we need to recognize that. Also being sensitive to the fact that there are many couples that can't have children, have tried to have children, and things like that. Definitely want to be sensitive to that as well. But the question of, can a Christian couple intentionally choose not to have children? Again, the heart check. Am I doing it for selfish reasons because I have ambitions for my life? Am I doing it, or am I doing it for God-pleasing reasons? I think all of those things can and should be considered.
So what I think I'm hearing is we're allowed a choice.
Yes.
At the end of the day, to choose what's right for our families.
Yeah, but give serious, prayerful thought to your why.
Yes.
Is it materialism because I want to be rich? Is it selfish ambition? Is it selfishness in general?
Sure.
Or is it wisdom? Wisdom dictates that I shouldn't for these reasons.
That's helpful. All right. We have 2 more questions. Next question is, can a Christian pursue plastic surgery or cosmetic enhancements? And right, this is a huge scale, right? Cosmetic surgery, Botox, braces, taking care of your teeth, right? There are a lot of different things that you can do. So where's the line between caring for our bodies and vanity? Ready, go.
Yes.
I'm glad you asked such easy questions.
You're welcome.
Oh man, this is tough. We know that our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit. That's from the Bible. This is the place where God has chosen to take up dwelling in the heart of the believer, where His kingdom comes, and so we want to respect the bodies that God gave us. We want to understand that they ultimately belong to Him. He is the giver, and it's something I have to steward, something I have to manage for His glory. We understand that God made us and that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. One of the Psalms tells us as well. So we want to care for our bodies. We want to care for our health. So I think when it comes to plastic surgery and cosmetic things, there are 2 different categories. Some are for health and functional concerns. Those also come under the category of plastic surgery, like a cleft palate being repaired, or after there's somebody in our church who had a cancer on their chin that did tremendous damage when they did the surgery to remove it, and they've done several reconstructive surgeries since then to try to rebuild the jaw and make her mouth more usable, make her speech clearer, and all those things. Are there good motives for doing a surgery like that? Absolutely, there is. We can also, again, we'll go to the extremes. You can also find very clear examples of people who are doing it purely for vanity, purely for attention, purely for outward looks rather than what's in the heart. And in those situations, is God smiling as you try to bring attention to yourself instead of Him? I would say the answer to that is a clear no. Are there gray areas between those 2 extremes? Yeah, there probably are. Braces are sometimes functional. Sometimes sometimes they're just for looks. Is there a godly reason to have your looks appear better? I think there is. We were told, I'm in a pastor group for mentoring and coaching, and we talk about our health, and we want to be in good health. And there are 2 main reasons. Number one, you have better energy when you have good health. But the other reason we talked about is if somebody sees a pastor who is clearly not taking care of himself, that what representation does that give us of God? If a man of God appears to be lazy or tremendously out of shape, is that giving a good witness to the God we serve? And the answer was no, not really. It would be good if we could attract people to God through how we take care of ourselves as well. Should we groom? Should we be presentable? Should we probably not smell? All those are probably good things to do.
Thank you for showering today.
Yes. So there are vain reasons for doing things, but there are also God-centered, godly-focused reasons for doing things, and that can apply to cosmetic surgery as well.
What about like middle of the road? So something super popular, people especially that I've worked with in the past, Botox, right? Wrinkles. Right before I got here, actually, I was in the bathroom and I noticed a wrinkle. I turned 30 this year, and I'm just like, this is when it starts. So, right, Botox, is that bad? Like, because I think like that is it's becoming more common, and you probably hate me for this question right now.
Again, heart check. What is your motive? Why do you want to feel better about yourself, or is it I want to change my appearance so that I can reach more people for Jesus somehow? Or, what is my motive? Am I discontent with the way I am? I mean, the truth is, we're all aging.
Really
Truth
sad.
is, we're never going to outpace the wrinkles. They're eventually going to catch up to us.
Yeah.
So to cope with that earlier rather than later, and just to say, well, this is the natural cycle of life, and this is what's inevitable and what's going to happen. And true beauty is on the inside, not the way I look on the outside. I think all of those things are good things to wrestle with.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question too, because this is something that we're thinking about in our own household. Not for me, but for our 3-year-old. I know that like the internet is forever, and maybe someday he's going to listen to this podcast. But when he was born, we noticed like right away that there's a bump of skin like right here in the middle of his nose, and if you look at him, you can see there's a white bump. And we've joked about it, and we've told each other anyway that it looks like a little baby rhino, just a little rhinoceros. But I do wonder about the psychological impact that's going to have on him later in life. And so when he was born, just a few months after he was born, we had it looked at, by a plastic surgeon just to see what their ideas were and what kind of procedure there might be to remove that. And we ultimately decided not to do it at that time because it would have involved like putting him under, and just the idea of like putting a
baby
6-month-old under like was not, it didn't sit well with us. But, before he starts school, we're going to revisit it again and see if that's a possibility for him. So,
yeah. So just walking through that and like considering everything of, I love this conversation. All right. We have one last question. I'm really excited for this one because I have no idea how you're going to answer. Can a Christian swear?
Can a Christian swear? I thought of a funny answer, but I won't go there. But
oh, come on.
That would involve swearing, but
heck no.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Heck no.
All right. Yeah, this is a good question. So many people do. Jesus said, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." He said, "Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." So we've got that guidance from God. In Ephesians, it says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up." James warned us about the power of the tongue. So all of these things we have to consider as we consider the words that come out of our mouth. I think the main consideration is this. Are the words that I'm speaking, are they building up or are they tearing down? Are they life-giving or are they life-taking? Are they offensive or are they attractive? Are they good or are they evil? That's just the simple criteria we can apply when we're talking about it. The truth is, we have a lot more control over what's coming out of our mouths than what people tend to think. Like, I've been sworn all my life. I've always been a swearer, so I can't control that. It's just a habit. But no, but actually, with just the littlest bit of intentionality and a compelling why, a person can change that very, very quickly. I've found one time a friend of mine and we were in Moscow. I was a missionary in Russia for 12 years. Every time we had a child born in Russia, we had to go to Moscow to the embassy to register the birth of our child. So my friend and I had children within a few months of each other. We both went to Moscow together to register their birth. And there in the embassy was this other American. And of course, you haven't seen many Americans, so you strike up a conversation immediately. And this guy had the foulest mouth that I have ever heard in my entire life. Wow. I'm not exaggerating when I say every third or fourth word was a swear word, a cuss word. Just left and right, and he was a talker. Like he talked for 10 minutes without taking a breath. Didn't ask a thing about us. Just talked with every third word a swear word. And then finally he said, "So, what are you guys doing here? Who are you?" We're like, "We're Christian missionaries." He goes, "Oh, well, you're probably really impressed with my language then, aren't you?" And he joked about it. And then we went on and talked for another half an hour. And not a single other swear word came out of his mouth. Wow. He instantly was able to turn it off.
Wow.
So I use that as an illustration. We can be careful about what we're saying. Why do we use words like that? What is the intended impact? Are we just trying to fit in with other people? Are we taking a shortcut way to add emotional impact to our words? Would there be a better way we could do it, a more intelligent way? I think these are all things to consider. The nature of the swear words, I think, matters too. So if it's taking God's name in vain, using God's name, but we're not praying to God or thinking about God, he has some pretty clear instructions about that one. But what about other words that aren't the name of God, but they're considered swear words or offensive in our society? Well, thinking about our neighbor, we don't know who's listening. We don't want to give offense to those around us. Why use them? What's the purpose? I would say let's make an effort to get all those out of our language, just to give glory to God with our words, to build people up and not to tear people down.
Yeah, and it is interesting when people find out that you're a pastor and then they kind of are embarrassed about the way that they were talking and things like that. sometimes I look for opportunities to kind of use that, that if they, kind of feel embarrassed or ashamed about something that they said, and then they find out that I'm a pastor or something like that. You don't have to change your language for me, but I do know about someone who has something to say about language, and maybe it's best to change for him.
That's super wise.
You would actually be surprised at how often a swear word comes out in the pastor's office during counseling, quite regularly, and then they usually catch it immediately and they apologize, and I usually just make light of it in the moment, and I say, I've heard that. It's not the first time that word has come out in this office, and then we move right on, and I don't call it out, but it's usually just the one time. Usually they don't keep doing that.
Which proves that, we can adjust our language.
Yep.
But I think it goes back to a lot of our other topics of what are you listening to? What are you watching? Who are you around? Because I think like when you hear it so much, it will pop in your brain even more. I know that happens if I'm watching a certain show that has a lot of explicit, like that just happens. It's more common. Or if I'm around a lot of people who swear, that just automatically comes into my verbiage more frequently. So
I've also noticed that if I suddenly get an injury of some sort, words like that are much more likely to come out of my mouth than any other time.
Why is that? Like, couldn't we come up with something like Schnickel Fritz or something like that? Like, why doesn't that come to our mind first?
My dad had great, I think before he met my mom, he used to use more colorful language, and then my mom very quickly taught him not to do that. But his phrase was, he had two phrases he would say when he was working on a car, and he'd wrap his knuckles against trying to get a wrench or get a bolt off or something. He would say rapper fracker or sapsucker. Those were his two swear words.
Okay.
Rapper fracker. Like, it sounds like a bad word, but it's actually not. So and he very hardly ever would a word come out of his mouth except for those two. So we called that okay. That was a win.
Just a way to get the angst out, apparently. Yes. I love it. Yes. Okay. Wow, we covered a lot today. Are you exhausted? I'm exhausted.
That was a lot.
All right, but thank you.
Good.
Yeah, thank you both for tackling it with honesty and biblical wisdom, even though you weren't able to give us clear answers all the time. I know that must be hard as a pastor when we try to stump y'all. I just want to call it one more time to everyone listening that the goal of these questions really aren't to create a rule book. So if we did that at all in here that we're unaware of, please forgive us. That's not our intent at all, but it really is just to help us walk closely with Jesus and using God's word as our guide. So not black and white. Some of it really comes down, a lot of it really comes down to conscience and discernment. And if you ever really need help with that, right, look to your pastors, look to the Christian friends around you, the community around you. That's what God gave us each other for, is to do life together and to navigate all of these topics together. So that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us today on this episode. Make sure to share it with your friends, like, subscribe. We're so grateful that we get to do this here at 922 Ministries, and that you all continue to tune in to listen to us. So that's all we have today for this episode of Light Talks. We'll see you next time.